So today we're going to run through some introductions to who I am and who Vince is, who's going to be presenting to you the highlights of Cerberus's new 13 launch. We'll give you some background on Redwood, and we'll jump into some Q&A at the end. So I'm Max. I'm the general manager of file transfer business here at Redwood Software. And on the line, we have Vince as well, who led our efforts around SAML and SSO on the Cerberus side. So that has been a major part of our 13 release. And we're excited to share that with you and run through a demo of that today. So what is this Redwood company that you now see in our logo? So many of you have been customers of Cerberus for 10, some of you more than 20 years. And earlier this year in January, we joined the Cerberus joined the Redwood family. So Redwood is a leader in full stack automation for the enterprise. So we focus 100% of our efforts on helping our customers with tough and mission critical automation tasks. These range from workload automation all the way to file transfer. And our focus on automation gives us a big advantage when it comes down to what we can do for our customers and the types of services and products that we build and the expertise that we bring to those. And our customers reward us with an NPS score that's about 2x that of our competition broadly across our products. So our solutions are the fabric that connects modern cloud applications with legacy platforms that many of our customers deal with in their IT infrastructure. And it's a critical piece of fabric as the modern enterprise navigates a changing IT infrastructure. So we have 5 major products here at Redwood. On the workload automation side, some of you may have run into these in your work in the IT sphere. We have Redwood, Active Batch, and Tidal software. And across the file transfer business, we have 2 solutions. And one is our MFT solution, JScape. And then our newest addition to Redwood, which is our secure file transfer solution, Cerberus, which is what we're going to be talking about today. In terms of kind of how we look at the space, so today we have both JScape and Cerberus available for our more than 6,500 global customers. Again, some of our customers have been around with these products for more than 20 years, and many of the folks that have worked in these companies are still here at Redwood today and are helping us build the next generation of products. Like, we're going to see the investment that we made in the release of version 13. And we're really excited about the combined suite of file transfer solutions that we now have available for you. We can really meet you wherever you are in the scope of your needs for file transfer, and helping you, reduce risk and increase your operational efficiency around file transfer automation. So without further ado, let's get into FTP Server 13 highlights. So we'll be seeing a demo of our Azure Active Directory SAML SSO functionality here shortly. But the highlights of 13 really combine 2 years of customer-driven work that was put into this release. So hundreds of interviews and comments from customers on things that they wanted us to focus on, and we put those into play. So we have upgraded encryption, we have folder automation events, we have improved geo-blocking. We also, in unison with Redwood support, now support 24-hour mission critical severity one support. So we have a global team that is available for you in our new Enterprise Plus package. And this is all brought to you by the same great team that you've worked with for years. So we're really excited for the future here at Redwood with Cerberus. And with that, we're going to hand over to Vint for the demo of SAML SSO.
All right, thanks a lot, Max. Really appreciate your introduction. Yeah, my name is Vincent Drake, and I've been the lead engineer working on the SAML SSO initiative. But I got to say, I can't in good conscience continue without giving a shout out to the rest of my engineering team. Paul Harada and Patrick Mills. They are fantastic engineers, and it's a privilege to work with them. This would not be completed without their work. I'm excited to share this feature with you, and hopefully this is just the beginning of the SSO support that we need to put in our product for you. So yeah, this is a quick outline of the agenda we're going to do. I'm planning on just giving a quick outline on what SAML and SCIM are. They're the fundamental protocols that get all of this working together. I'll give you a tour of the SSO UI features, things you'll find in the version 13 product. And then we're going to set up a working SSO configuration between a demo Azure AD instance and my Cerberus environment. Really just a three-step process. Set up an enterprise application in Azure AD that sort of represents the Cerberus application from the viewpoint of Azure AD. And then on the Cerberus side, we have an SSO configuration, and that does the opposite way. Cerberus sees Azure AD as an SSO configuration. And then we'll synchronize configuration settings between the two to get them both communicating friendly. And then we'll test SSO with a couple of demo users. The demo I'm going to do here is going to be sort of quick and dirty. So we'll run into a couple of planned issues, and we'll do some iterations on those and do a little troubleshooting. So you can see some of the common issues you might run into if you're, excitedly just configuring as quickly as possible to get SSO working. So yeah, SAML is a security assertion markup language. It's a very long-standing protocol, XML-based protocol that is nearly 20 years old, I believe. It has many features and use cases, but we're narrowly supporting only the web browser SSO profile. If you're familiar with the specification, you'll know what that is. The SCIM protocol is a REST-based protocol that we use to collect information from Azure AD. Azure AD pushes information about users and groups and their changes as their enterprise application changes. So we're going to have users that are in scope for the enterprise application. And once SCIM is in place, Azure AD will inform Cerberus of any changes to those users and groups. And Cerberus will use that information to display the users we have access to and set up policies to set fine-grained authorization controls. So these are the links for the complete documentation. I won't be following them to the letter so that we can do some of these choreographed errors. But when you do work these in your environment, we recommend following these documents to the letter.
And we'll be sharing these after the presentation today. So with that, Vince, I'll hand it over to your share.
Yeah, give me just a moment. So first, we've got give you an orientation of how this will go. On the right side, I've got the Cerberus FTP Server admin console, the one you know and love from our product. On the left side, we have the Azure AD environment that we're working with. And this hovering Firefox window will be our end user browser. The SAML support that we have here only supports the HTTP protocol. So what we canonically call the web client, where you access files and folders from a web browser. So this is what we know already. The native user logs in with their username and password. So the new item that you'll find in version 13 is this, the SSO users under the authentication category. This is modeled after our existing integrations with AD users and LDAP users, so it looks rather familiar. We've got a users tab. You can browse through the existing users that you have in the configuration. We have some configuration here. These are the settings and controls that we need to have a two-way trust between ourselves and Azure AD. The SCIM provisioning. And this is used for getting that push data from Azure AD so that Cerberus can see how many users and groups are in scope for the application. And finally, the user and group custom mappings. This is the glue that connects Azure AD users and groups to Cerberus native groups and virtual directories. I'll pop up to the user manager and show you these are the groups that we have in our sort of test environment. I've got a small collection of groups that model the resources that we want to extend to our Azure AD users. Now off on the left side, we'll take a look at our Azure AD environment. I've got about 30 users. I'm not going to use all of them, but this is to represent a sort of small organization. And we have a few groups that represent, again, the org chart of a small to medium-sized company. So the first step we'll do is we'll create an enterprise application inside Azure AD. So on the left side, we're going to go to Enterprise Applications. And we'll create a new application. Again, click the Create Your Own Application. We'll choose a non-gallery application. I'm going to give it a generic name. This name, I believe, doesn't matter that much. We'll click Create. And while that's running, we're going to clean up our Cerberus environment. Since we're starting fresh, we're going to delete our existing SSO configuration and start from scratch. We'll click New SSO, and we'll give it a display name. This is going to be something that's going to make sense to your end users. So I'm going to use the name of my Azure AD tenant. And now we've got a framework, and we'll start connecting the dots. We'll jump right in, and we'll do Setup Single Sign-On on the Azure AD side. We're going to be using the SAML protocol, so of course we click the SAML button. And we'll start at step 1, basic SAML configuration, and click the Edit field. Entity ID is just a name that needs to agree between Azure AD and Cerberus. It's almost arbitrary. Azure AD has a few controls on what you can put here. I'll just put something generic for now. And we'll have to copy and paste this from the Azure AD side to the Cerberus side. Next, we'll do reply URL. This defines an endpoint that Cerberus will be listening on to handle SAML messages coming from Azure AD. And we'll need to build it on the Cerberus side. First, click the pull-down menu, and this displays the known external host names that Cerberus is aware of. We'll pick one of these, check that the port number is correct, and click plus. If this isn't the actual external host name, maybe you've got routers or other network equipment that change the name or whatnot, you can make a modification here. The only requirement we have is that it must end in SAML/ACS. And the UI will tell you if you've got anything wrong. I'm going to copy this here and paste it in the Azure AD configuration. Excuse me, just a moment. It looks like the web sharing is interfering with my. There we go, save. Okay. I'll click Save. We'll close the editor on this side. And we're not going to test yet. We've got a couple more things to fix. Step 2 is attributes and claims. This has to do with the information that's shared from Azure AD to Cerberus when an SSO authentication completes. Things like user attributes and group membership are things we have here. There's only a couple of changes we'll make from the out-of-the-box settings that Azure AD sets up for us. And we'll make those changes now. The first is a group claim. All this really means is that it says during the SAML SSO authentication, Azure AD is going to provide Cerberus with the groups that the user is a member of. So we click Add a Group Claim. And this first part of the configuration is all about scoping. In a sense, it's how many of the groups do you want to share with this external application with Cerberus? You could share all the groups in your entire tenant, only security groups, directory roles. We're going to choose the most conservative while still having functionality, which is groups assigned to the application. This means is your Azure AD administrators will need to explicitly put those groups into the enterprise application in order for Cerberus to be aware of them. So we'll click groups assigned to the application and make sure source attribute is set to group ID and click Save. There are two other changes we have to make sure that all different types of Azure AD users work consistently on the Cerberus side. We go into details in the configuration documents that I linked earlier, but for now, we'll just make the change without going into too much detail. On the name ID field, we'll click here and change from user principal name, the source attribute, to user.local principal name. Click Save. And then we'll go down to the name claim and make the same change from source attribute user principal name to user.local. Save. And we'll close the editor. Everything else out of the box is enough for Cerberus to do the SSO successfully. Now we'll step down to step 3, which is SAML certificates. Certificates are really the cornerstone of the two-way trust that we're establishing between Cerberus and Azure AD. So it's critical that we get these right. Cerberus won't trust any SAML assertion that isn't signed by the certificate that we give it. So we're going to click Edit here and first make one configuration change under signing options. Cerberus requires that both the response and assertion are signed. I don't want to get into too much detail, but there's a couple of XML messages and we're conservative at Cerberus, so we're going to make sure both are signed. And then we'll click the context menu on the active certificate and download the base64 certificate. Now we'll hop over to the Cerberus side. On the certificate line, we'll click the green arrow to upload. We'll find that certificate that we just downloaded and open it. We'll see that the thumbprint matched between the two, so I didn't make a mistake on which file I chose. So we're good to go there. Back in Azure side, we'll click Save and close the editor. The final step is just a collection of copy and paste. These are the URLs that Cerberus needs to know in order to initiate SSO communication with this Azure AD tenant. So we'll grab the login URL, copying it from Azure AD, pasting it to Cerberus, the Azure AD identifier, and finally the login URL. With that, we're done with the SAML configuration, but there's still one final step that Cerberus requires, and that's default authorizations, you could say. So default mapping configuration is another way we say that. So for simplicity, well, let me explain. This is what resources a user will have access to if they log in and no other finer grained controls are set. This is very similar to the AD and LDAP configurations. So if you're familiar with those, you're familiar with this. For simplicity, we'll click Global Home Users. And we'll set a root directory of SAML SSO. And we'll click the permissions button just to grant those users access to everything. So this will create a home directory with the SAML SSO name plus the user's username, user principal name in this case. Close. Now on the Cerberus side, we'll just complete everything by enabling and clicking Save. Now with that, we'll go to the end user browser and see what's changed. Click Refresh. And here's our SSO button. And this is how we begin the SSO process with Cerberus. Let's click this and see what happens. So we've already been redirected to Microsoft. We did not have an existing session with Azure AD, so Azure AD is asking us to log in. I'll choose this user, which I've logged in with in the past. Got a cached password. And so this is our first gotcha. The administrators configured the application to block users unless they're specifically granted access to the application. The signed in user Lee is blocked because they're not a direct member with group of a group with access, nor has access directly been assigned by an administrator. So good thing we're the administrator. We'll just go ahead and fix this. We've forgotten the step earlier. We'll go back to the Azure AD page. And we'll go in our enterprise application, click on users and groups. So we see that we don't have any users or groups in scope. That was the problem. So we'll click add, and we'll choose under users and groups. And we'll find our test user, Lee. Click on Lee, select, and assign. Now, it may take a moment or two for Azure AD to pick up the new user, but we'll test anyway. So we should already have an established session with Azure AD. So when we click the SSO, choose Lee. Oh, I'm mistaken. We're being challenged for a password again. So I think Azure AD denying us access to the application prevented us from establishing an Azure AD session. So we'll sign in. And there. We're in Lee's files. I already have some files uploaded there. We'll add a couple more or replace. And that's that. We'll log out. And one thing different from the Cerberus native user experience is that if you click the SSO button again, you'll go right back in. You've already got an Azure AD session, and Cerberus still trusts that session. On the back end, there's a bit of redirection going on. We actually redirect to Azure AD, and Azure AD redirects the user back to us with a SAML claim, but we don't see any of that. I'll go ahead and terminate that session so we can see again. This user has MFA enabled, so I've got to approve on my phone before Azure AD lets us into the console. And now we'll terminate their session, signing out of the portal. And now this browser session has no active Azure AD session. And if we click the SSO button, we'll be challenged for credentials again. Step through one more time, just for fun. Okay, so let's go back to Cerberus and see what else might be missing here. Lee is actually a member of some groups, and we have some, we want to be able to give him access to certain things based on that. So let's try that right now. Under user and group custom mappings, that would be very similar to your AD and LDAP. We try to do new for a group-to-group mapping. So we see again, Cerberus isn't aware of any groups at all, let alone the ones that Lee is a member of. And this, again, rolls back to the enterprise application. So before any users or groups can be exposed to Cerberus, they've got to be added to the enterprise application. We'll go ahead and add, if I recall correctly, he's a member of support. And just in case I'm remembering incorrectly, I'll add the IT group as well. So what we've effectively done here is given both Lee explicit and any members of support and information technology access to the Cerberus application. And we can see there are 2 users in the support group, Sophie and Stephen. And for the IT group, we have Lee and Lydia. So let's go back to Cerberus and see what we have. Oh, gosh. In fact, there's still no users. And if I go group to group mapping, there's still no groups. So we've forgotten another step, and that is the SCIM provisioning system. So like I said, SCIM is the protocol that Azure AD uses to inform Cerberus of all the user and group changes that have taken place. And right now we haven't got that connected. So let's finish that and see if we can make a little more progress. Go back to Azure Active Directory, Enterprise Applications, back to our FTP Services application. And we're going to click on the provisioning item on the left nav bar. No provisioning is set up, so we'll click Get Started. And we'll choose the automatic provisioning system. Now we see it's very similar. We've got a tenant URL and we've got a secret token. So the tenant URL is very similar to the ACS URL in the SSO configuration. It's just an endpoint that Cerberus listens on for SCIM communication. So we'll choose again an external host name, port number. There's our generated URL. Copy and paste that over to the Azure AD side. My password saving makes it look like there's a secret token set up already, but we've got to generate one on the server side and copy it over. Now, before we can hit test, we've got to make sure this is enabled and saved on the server side. Now, this is an interesting warning. We put it in place for a good reason. Anytime you make changes to an SSO or SCIM configuration that must be mirrored on the Azure AD side, we raise this warning to warn the administrator that they might have made a change that's broken their running configuration. We're going to hit test, and it looks like it's good. So we'll save. And while we're here, we'll check out mappings. Azure AD sends their users and groups through a sort of transformation before it sends it across the SCIM protocol. And the mappings determine how they get massaged into Cerberus compatible data, we'll say. There's one required change under users that we must make. Under user principal name, we must change the source attribute from user principal name to original user principal name. This is paired with the change that we made to the SAML claims. Again, hard to get into details, but basically it makes sure that all the different types of Azure AD users are treated consistently in the Cerberus environment. Azure AD has a way of making the user principal names look different depending on whether it's an external user, an external Azure AD user on a different tenant, or an internal user on the current tenant. While we're here, we'll look at the other information. Many of these are details that we do not collect in Cerberus. Azure AD will still send them in the SCIM protocol, but we will discard that data. I'm not going to make the changes now, but in your own environments, we don't need street address, city, state. Those are details that we do not collect in Cerberus. Again, all covered in detail in the documentation we linked earlier. So we'll save this setting. Close the editor. Close the editor once more. And now we're back at the provisioning page. Let's go ahead and start provisioning. Now, provisioning only happens every 40 minutes, according to Azure AD, for their own resource consumption. So we may have to wait up to 40 minutes before Cerberus is made aware of any of these users. Fortunately, it came through right away. But if we've missed anybody, we will need to use the provision on demand to move them over to Cerberus quickly. Under SCIM provisioning, you can refresh the users and group count, and this will show you that Cerberus is mirrored 4 users and 2 groups. So now that the users and groups are mirrored in Cerberus, we can start to make finer grained authorization rules. So under user and group custom mappings, we can click new, and we see that we're aware of information technology and support SSO groups. We'll connect support on the Azure AD side to support on the Cerberus side and click add mapping. Now, when we go to users, if we see a support user, we can see that they've been granted access to this share because that's part of the native group virtual directories. This might be better illustrated if we go over to User Manager and we go to Groups and we look at the support native group. Under virtual directories, you'll see that we've set up a native group that grants access to this folder. And already it sees that the mappings are there, and it shows us the members of the group and where they're coming from. So let's go back to our end user browser, and we'll try logging in as Sophie. We'll have to log out of Lee. And we're signing out of the Azure AD session. And we'll log out of the Cerberus session, and we'll begin again. So now we'll choose Sophie. Challenge for a password because we have no Azure AD session. And she's in. She has a home directory with all of her files, and she has that support IT collab folder that she got through group membership. So it's important also to note that that we've integrated the SSO, SAML SSO features throughout the rest of the features of Cerberus. Some very important ones that you'll know are logging. So we made sure to identify the users very specifically when they're in the logs. And also I've already shown you under groups, you can see the SSO users that have group-to-group mappings. It also works for user-to-group mappings. Finally, reporting. You can generate a login report that shows all of your SSO users and the sessions they've initiated. You can perform an account report. I'll limit my account report only to SSO users. And you can see what SSO users have been granted access to which virtual directories. Folder report, same deal, except from the folder's perspective. And if I've uploaded a file, I believe I have, then also file activity reports will also appear here. Anytime a user uploads or downloads files, whether they're native, AD, LDAP, or SSO users, they'll be reported correctly. We can see the traffic that we had generated from Lee a little bit earlier. So that really concludes the live section of the demo, and I'll pass it back to Max to take over.
All right, thank you very much, Vince. This is really good stuff, and we're excited to get it out into the hands of our customers. So I know many of you have been asking about SSO for a long time. Obviously, we have rolled out Azure AD as the first provider. And we do plan to add other providers for authentication in the future. So we're targeting a couple additions in late Q3 of 2023. So Ron has answered a couple questions in here. He's our product lead for Cerberus. So do we have other questions, Ron or Cindy? Or Vince, do you want to run through those?
Yeah. Well, you've already implied, but I'll jump in on support for Okta. We're definitely interested in supporting other identity providers, and it's something we're actively working on now. Unfortunately, there are some idiosyncrasies between different IDPs in how they implement SAML. So we've got to negotiate those correctly to make it work with Okta and Google and other identity providers. It's something we're working on.
Excellent. And Vince, there was another question. Can SSO be used to set up Cerberus admins via an Azure AD group? That way they don't have to be created in Cerberus locally?
I'm really happy you asked that question. It's something I'd like to extend out. We haven't done it yet. It was a couple of versions ago, perhaps last year, that we integrated Active Directory users into the administrative console. I think it's a natural next step. We can start using, say, Azure AD roles and to let people access the admin console using their SSO credentials. I think it's very important. We haven't yet got it just yet.
Okay, awesome. So that'll probably be in a dot release at some point in 2023.
It'll take some time. There's the web client and the admin console are very different, so it'll take a little time there.
Yep.
I've noticed a couple of questions about SSO and MFA. I think so. Normally, the Azure AD environment does prompt you for multi-factor authentication. And normally with my test users, I'll see that, but I think there's maybe some idiosyncrasy with my test setup. If your Azure AD environment requires MFA, then it will certainly prompt them for it. I think you may have seen it in the demo. There was just a quick pop-up where I had to go to the Microsoft Authenticator and tap and use my fingerprint on the phone. And that was the MFA. You just couldn't see it on the screen share because it's on my phone.
All right. Vince, you have the list here. I'm just trying to run through a couple of these, but do you have any others that pop out to you?
Let's see. I'm not familiar with ping ID. I'll take an item on what that is and how to check it out. Oh yeah, the other changes to version 13. There are. Max mentioned a few of them, the folder events. I'm afraid I'm not really ready to demo those other features at this point. That was a question from Brian.
Yeah, and we can certainly follow up with another with maybe another webinar that we get Ron on, who is our product lead, to show the extent of version 13 and the new things that we rolled out. So we'll keep you updated on that as we move forward with the release. It is already available, to be clear, but we're still working through some of this kind of stuff.
I want to answer Stuart's question. I'm sorry, I'm not really ready to handle FileZilla specific questions, but I do please urge you to reach out to our support organization. If you're having a problem using the FileZilla client, please reach out to our support organization so we can help you. I'm afraid I can't address that now, though. Nikhil Mandara asks, do we need to add all users and/or groups to the users and groups manually in Azure AD Enterprise application? I believe that depends on how your Azure AD environment is set up. On all the tests that I've done, I've assumed that we want a very conservative configuration where you maybe have a subset of users in your Azure AD environment that you'll want to have access to Cerberus services. But I'd say I'm admittedly not an expert in Azure AD, so there may be easier ways of getting to what you want if you want all users to have access.
All right, Vince, any other questions?
There's some really good information here I'm going to have to pick up for research. Duo is an IDP. I have to admit, I did not know Duo offered their own SAML IDP. I'll definitely add that to the list of things I'll need to look into. Thank you, Manish, for that question. Abraham asks if we can record the documents and the recordings. Cindy, I believe you'll have access to the recording and and all. I think we'll be reaching out to customers on if you missed the demo or want to share a recording.
Yeah, correct. You will be receiving a follow-up email that will give you access to this webinar And if you have any questions, you can reach out directly to me.
Oh, okay. There's so many good questions. I hope I don't miss anybody. Michael asked a very good question about 2FA. Does the 2FA require Azure AD, or can that still work standalone? It can still work standalone. Cerberus has support for one-time or time-based one-time password, as well as Duo applications. So for native users and for for native users and for Active Directory users, Cerberus itself can enforce the MFA requirement. In this deployment with SSO, we depend on the IDP to enforce whatever policies it has in place for the user's authentication. So if Azure AD requires MFA, then we leave it up to Azure AD to perform that MFA. Nolan asks about update on wildcards for scheduled tasks within Cerberus. Definitely check out the recent the release of 13. We have features in there for scanning folders and initiating events based on wildcards for those folders. So Nolan, please check out our release notes. I think you'll find what you're looking for there. If not, please reach out to our support organization and they can guide you.
All right. Well, with that, I think we have covered our. I think we've covered most questions today. We've still got a couple here. We're going to keep this queue. There's some that will reach out to you directly to answer. But I'd like to thank you for spending some time with us this morning or afternoon. And we hope you're as excited about version 13 as we are. So a lot of work been put in both by our customers in terms of submitting feedback and helping shape the future of our product. And some great work just by the whole team at Cerberus in getting this into your hands. So we're really excited. If you have any issues in updating from a prior version, please reach out to our support team. And we look forward to supporting you as customers going forward. So thank you very much for the time, and we'll be in touch with the more broad introduction to the 13 features that have been released. So. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day.